Hi everyone. Suki's right here, trying to keep her out of trouble. She's in, it's that time of day. She's in mischief mode. Welcome in. Thanks for joining me. It's the end of February. I just wanted to tell you what I've been up to lately. Other than being in a memoir mode, so more memoirs have been read. I've just been going through books in my library bag that I've picked up. I've gotten many holds in over the last couple weeks, and I just try something and it doesn't work, and I try something else and it doesn't work, and I tried, what was it that I tried the other, I tried reading off of my own shelves. I tried reading, is it William Stegner's Crossing to Safety, which is a pretty safe book to start to read when you're in a slump. That didn't work. I mean, I liked it. It's a very beautifully written book, but I don't know, it just, nothing's sticking, you know those kinds of moods. Well, I ended up getting a book to stick, which I'll talk about in a second, but then I got annoyed with it because it wasn't about anything. So I think, I don't know if I'm past the slumpiness or not. I've got some of Suki's favorite little toys here, so in case she gets wild, I've got the ribbon sticks. Okay, what have I read? I have read what is one of the most excellent memoirs. If I haven't already read an excellent memoir in February, which was Grief is for People by Sloane Crossley, I read Jeanette Winterson's Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal. I don't know how this got on my radar. I've never read Jeanette Winterson's fiction. Sexing the Cherry and Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. But I do want to read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit for sure. This memoir, if you want to talk about a life story from nothing, and I don't just mean poverty, but I mean being completely unloved or in a situation where her family couldn't express love, but also she was adopted by who she calls Mrs. Winterson, not mom. And it's more of a childhood of depravity than it is abuse. But there is abuse in that she is sometimes locked away in the coal cellar, coal bin, or just locked out of the house when she's really young because her mother, Mrs. Winterson, gets angry at something. So her Mrs. Winterson, the adopted mother, is like an extreme, like fundamentalist something, religion. And they believe in this particular group that she belongs to, they believe in the end times, in the apocalypse. And she also pretty much believes that being happy is sinful. She's very suspicious of anything that could make someone happy. Although there are times, like, this is the cool thing about this book, like Jeanette Winterson tells the truth and is very stark about it, but not in an egregious way. She's just telling the truth. And that truth means that, yeah, there were some moments of levity, and she remembers those, even though they were very few and far between. She ends up leaving her house at 16 because her mother gives her an ultimatum, and Jeanette leaves, or makes a decision to leave. And her mother says, because, Jeanette says, I need to be happy in life. I need to be me in order to be happy. And Jeanette's adoptive mother says, why be happy when you could be normal? There is such wonderful writing in this memoir. Number one, overcoming all the odds. The fact that she makes it somehow to Oxford, a school of Oxford. And that story is amazing and just wonderful to read. The fact that she finds safety and solace in her little town library. And there's a chapter that's my favorite chapter in this book called, I think it's called Literature from A to Z. And she tries to go back and visit her mother later in life. She doesn't tell her mother she's in Oxford or anything like that. She's, becoming a writer. I marked so many places in this book to read passages from. It's insane. The poets and the writers she talks about in this favorite chapter of mine called English Literature A to Z. I learned so many things, especially about poets and her favorite poems. There's a poem from the 17th century poet Andrew Marvell in here. She says, I began to realize that I had company. Writers are often exiles, outsiders, runaways, and castaways. These writers were my friends. Every book was a message in a bottle. Open it. I mean, yeah, like the other wonderful memoir that I read this month, this one also is excellent. I highly recommend this. Then I picked up another Sheila Heti because I was like on the Sheila Heti train after Alphabetical Diaries and and Jalen's interview from The Bar and the Bookcase. I picked up this might be her first novel. It's an autofiction from like 2012 called How Should a Person Be? A Novel from Life. This is truly like autofiction. So she takes herself and makes a character in the book named Sheila, who's a writer, and her friend Margot and her friend, I think, Misha and Margot are real friends in life, and she makes them fictional people, but they all have their same roles because Margot really was a painter. And in this book, Sheila's trying to write a play. Now, I don't know if that was true of the time, but I heard her say that like making these characters fictional gave her the framework to just go wherever she wanted to go and use whatever real facts she wanted to. And so that was a really interesting premise, and I jumped right in. But this was the book that really got me after reading stuff like this. It really got me because it was in that in-between place of like autofiction, and it's just about like people in their slice of life, like a certain amount of time in life, and they're just trying to find themselves, and how should a person be? How should Sheila be? She doesn't want to be defined by her love or sexual relationship. She just wants to make art, her kind of art, and she's trying to find herself. But like, I just got to the point where when I was like halfway through this book where I was saying, what is the point? What's the point of reading a book like this? That's the headspace I was in. But it was easy to keep reading and turn the pages because I love her writing. Her writing is so good no matter what she's doing. I don't always like what she's using as a framework for a book. So I just wasn't in the mood for this thing. I don't really have any comment on it because I just know I wasn't in the right space. I'm almost done with my NetGalley spree. I still have at least one book that I will be reading soon that gets published in March 19th, that I'll talk about when we get to March. And then I forgot that I guess I had requested Helen Garner's Monkey Grip. And this is a republished book that, who is the Pantheon they are reprinting her books. And Monkey Grip has the name as it does because a monkey is like at least 1.5 or 2 times stronger than a human being. So a monkey grip would be that much more stronger than a human's grip. And this is a book that was originally written in the 70s in Australia. I think it's Western Australia. And it's about Nora, and she's got a daughter named Grace. They're kind of hippie-like. She's asked to write screenplays or at least parts of movies. That's not defined or clear in this book. But it is kind of like a creative hippie type scene, and she falls in love with this guy who is a drug addict, but in her circle of friends, like he also is a creator, but not very often because he's strung out on heroin. I think it was 1977 this book was first published. Pantheon is republishing them. The introduction is by Lauren Groff. Worth the price of admission in and of itself. She says, "We find ourselves in the mid-70s in Melbourne, swept happily into this life of love and conversation and art and care through the open doors into the open beds. In less adept hands, more than 300 pages of lovesickness and drugged-out hijinks might either be cloying or dark and painful, like pressing a bruise over and over. Helen Garner is too brilliant, too unusual a writer for that. Her Melbourne bohemians live with little money and a great deal of drugs and sex. And then there's a dark side to these new freedoms too, which I haven't gotten to. I've just started reading this. I probably like 50 pages in, and I could highlight so many different places in this story. Like the writing is hypnotic. I don't really care about the story. I don't really care about the characters, but the writing is hypnotic. I will be starting. So there's a bunch of things that I might be starting, but I at least wanted to show you that because I have just finished Kate Briggs's This Little Art and I loved it so much. The Dorothy Project, and specifically Martin Riker at the Dorothy Project, so graciously reached out, asked if I would like a copy of an advance reader's copy of the long form. This is a Dorothy Project publishing this in the US. I can't recall who the publisher is in the UK, but it's already come out in the UK. And again, I'll just hold up how different, very square, compact, beautiful book. This is a work of fiction. Kate Briggs's long-awaited follow-up to This Little Art is a novel in the original sense of novelty, a form all its own. And she actually talks about the origin of the word novel in This Little Art. So I remember that from that book. The story of two people composing a day together. It's also an exploration of the origins of the novel. So I'll be reading this, of course, along with other books, as I always do, but I'm not sure yet what those other books are. I have an idea, but just not quite sure yet. I am really excited, like, what is it, 2 weeks from now, or a week and a half, 11 days from now, the International Booker long list will come out. And if there is ever a list that either reminds me of authors that I've wanted to read or allows me to discover authors to read, it's that list. And now the book haul. I picked up a couple books when I was leaving North Conway, New Hampshire, because we flew out of Portland, Maine, which has a couple bookstores that are used bookstores, and then one that is a new and used bookstore. So let's see, where did I get? Yeah, I got these two at Yes Bookstore, which is a tiny used bookstore with a gazillion books in it. So one of those bookstores that just has books stacked up. But thankfully, the books are alphabetically ordered. And I found another Anita Bruckner. This one is actually a penguin, an orange-spined penguin, which I've actually never seen before. I have them in another edition, which I can't recall. That might be vintage. But this one sounds really good. I couldn't pass it up. It says, naive and undemanding, Harriet Leighton expects very little of life, and that is what she receives. Married to a respectable man old enough to be her father, Harriet's only taste of passion comes when she meets Jack Peckham, the unruly, attractive husband of her friend, Tessa. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds really good. And then I found I know you can't see this, but a little signet paperback, another Wharton. I actually haven't heard of this, called Summer. It's described as the hot version of Ethan Frome because it's set in Western Massachusetts. Yeah, it's about an 18-year-old Charity Royale, bored in her little town, she meets a visiting architect, Lucius Harney. And this is the summer in the Berkshires, so set in the same area of Western Massachusetts. I started this, but then it was too soon, because right on the heels of House of Mirth, to get dropped back into small town Western Massachusetts after being in high society in New York City at the turn of the century, I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't the right tone for me. So I'll pick this up later. And then I went to Longfellow Books, which is a beautiful bookstore with so many new books and really cool displays. And then they have this big used book section. That's where I picked up this beautiful, don't let this disturb you. I know it's the price sticker and it was sticky. So I'm going to use a little bit of Goo Gone and I will get this off of there. Don't worry, it'll be all cleaned up. I found this Ivy Compton Burnett. I have heard of this author, and I've actually seen this book called Manservant and Maidservant. It might have been part of the NYRB Women's Read Along last year that is hosted by Kim O'Neill from Joie de Vivre on Instagram, but I don't know. But man, it sounds really interesting. Ivy Compton Burnett is one of the most original, artful, and elegant writers of our century. That's a blurb from Hilary Mantel, whose austere, savage, and bitingly comic novels constitute a singular and extraordinary contribution to English literature. Manservant and Maidservant is among the funniest and most surprising of Compton Burnett's inventions. It focuses on the household of Horace Lamb, sadist, skinflint, and tyrant, a man whose children fear and hate him and whose wife is planning to elope. That was it. That's all I needed to know. I thought, oh, that's funny. But especially if it's done in a comic, even if it's like a dark comedy way, I thought, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So yeah, that's what I picked up. Please share with me any thoughts you might have about any of the books that I've talked about here. I'd love to know if anyone's read this Jeanette Winterson memoir and Helen Garner. I know there's a lot of people out there that love Helen Garner. I would especially want to know if any of you have read any Ivy Compton Burnett. So, Suki loves her ribbon sticks. I hope all of you had a decent February. Looking forward to spring here in the US. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.